friends, and welcome for this World Habitat Day webinar, which has been jointly organized by 3R Waste Foundation in partnership with All India Institute of Local Self-Government. This is the month of October. Now it is known as Urban October because we celebrate World Habitat Day as well as the World Cities Day during this month. Mandated by the General Assembly in 1985, World Habitat Day is observed on the first Monday of every October, followed by events held worldwide throughout Urban October. And the last day of October, we organize globally events, what we call World Cities Day celebrations. The purpose is mainly to reflect on the state of our towns and cities, to recall the right of all to adequate shelter, basic services, and social and economic opportunities, and to remember that we all have the power and the responsibility to shape the future of our cities and towns and to promote sustainable urban development policies. Global urbanization, in fact, is seen as a major cause of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, important of which being CO2 emissions. They are responsible for about 70% of global carbon dioxide emissions stemming from transport, residential, commercial, and industrial buildings, energy sources, and waste dumping sites. Timely actions are required to create sustainable, carbon neutral, inclusive cities and towns by reducing these emissions through the collective, proactive role played by the national, regional, and local governments and organizations, communities, academic institutions, even the private sector, and all other stakeholders. The theme of UN World Habitat Day 2021 is accelerating urban action for a carbon-free world, which focuses on amplifying the global Race to Zero campaign and UN Habitat's climate action for cities, and encourage local governments to develop actionable zero carbon plans that create more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable cities and economies. It is very specially relevant to the upcoming COP26, scheduled to take place in Glasgow, UK from 1st to 12th November 2021. In today's webinar, we have 5 most distinguished speakers and panelists. Friends, we will take up your questions at the end of the presentations. I, of course, would like to request all the speakers to limit their presentations to about 12 minutes, but not more than 15 minutes in any case, so that we can take up some of the questions by the participants. I would first like to invite Professor K.K. Pandey, professor in the Indian Institute of Public Administration. Professor Pandey professionally is an urban economist, has been in the sector for nearly 3.5 decades or perhaps 4 decades, working in this area, for such a very long time. And he is going to speak largely on carbon-free urban India. How do we really make it? So I would like to invite Professor Pandey to share his thoughts and views. And perhaps I think, we will then have some questions towards the end of all presentations. Professor Pandey, please. You have to unmute yourself, Pandey ji.
Thank you very much, Dr. Singh sir, and other panelists and uh, audience. I'm Professor K.K. Pandey. As mentioned, I would briefly cover the carbon emission in India uh, with a particular reference to uh, what is happening uh, on this globally important aspect. As we know, sir, that pollution uh, is causing 7 million lives. Recently, there was a news item that the WHO has reduced norms for PM 2.5 and 2.10, which is importantly caused by carbon emission. But this carbon and pollution have high externalities. It is not only 7 million deaths, but also how many are suffering or will die in future due to this. What is their productivity? What is the impact on environment?
Panditji,
And
move your screen also. Your slide is not moving. Kindly move to your slide number 2.
is it now?
Not yet.
Is it visible now?
Your first slide is visible, but not the next one. Kindly move your next slide.
Is it now
Yes,
seen?
it's okay now.
Okay, okay. So we'll do like this. Yeah.
Please.
So pollution and carbon have high externalities. India has 1.7 to 2.5 million loss of lives as per different estimates. And urban India is particularly affected because 60 to 70% emission takes place in our cities and towns. Also, 14 out of 20 top polluted cities in the world have 6 Indian cities, out of that 5 in central NCR, that is Delhi and surrounding towns. It is in this context that WHO revised the norms and for 10 from 15 to for 2.5 and 15 from 20 for 2.10. But due to this global awareness and impact in India, last few years have seen several uh, initiatives taken in India. What we have nearly 52 million tons of uh, garbage. Out of that, a little over half is only partly scientifically treated. It includes 8 million CND waste, 8.7 million end-of-life vehicles, 1.8 million electronic waste, which is largely not processed. Only a few cities have started for CND waste. Landfill sites, we can see the hills. Uncontrolled tipping is the common feature which need proper attention, and segregation, wherever it is collected, segregation is not properly followed. Uh, there is issue of not in my backyard, road space reduction due to uh, uh, lack of collection of the waste, and shrinking water bodies are where people dump their uh, waste on one side of the lakes is a common problem in our major cities where lakes are drying and disappearing. Health hazard, environmentally unsafe wastage of resources are important point to be seen. And it is in this context that decentralized waste management with a particular focus on 3R is emerging. We can see that not in my backyard is a common habit. It is not only for dumping site, otherwise also. Strategy, the global conference of parties is to be held in November, and in view of that, now and particularly on Habitat Day, and this month is devoted to habitat, the issue attains special importance. Indian commitment is there, and urban sector missions of Government of India promote a tripartite actions, that is the central government, states, and urban local bodies, municipalities, to come together for appropriate actions. In addition to that, there are separate state actions, city-specific innovations, and also dedicated allocation, particularly by 15th Finance Commission, which shares the kitty of taxes and revenue of Government of India. Urban missions, particularly Smart City Mission, started one climate smart city assessment framework. In the second phase, they covered 126 cities. And this year, when the result was out on a star rating, Ahmedabad, Nagpur, Pune, Vijayawada, etc., won a rating on specific actions on 28 indicators covering urban planning with green cover, energy and green buildings, mobility and air quality, actions on these area, water management and waste management. And another initiative under Smart City is Street for People Challenge, where reimagining space for air, safe air, safety, and mobility among 113 cities. So these are important initiatives under urban missions. But in addition to that, Swachh Bharat Mission 2 and ODF plus and plus plus is the focus of Swachh Bharat Mission 2, which means collection and disposal of waste with 3R and minimize NIMBY. Amrit 2, these two are launched by our Honorable Prime Minister on 1st October, which has focus on surplus water, whereby 20% water is available for reuse. So it promotes circular economy, and the objective is to treat entire water. Piped water to all and water harvesting, treatment, reviving lakes are part of these initiatives. And 4.3 lakh crore is the allocation. Lakh means uh, 10 million and 2.5 times higher than phase 1. So this is 2.5 higher than the missions when they were started in 2014. 15th Finance Commission is particularly important because it has kept 38,000 crore covering 44 urban agglomerations, including 1115 towns and also villages. So this is something different, not done so far. We are taking water and sanitation focus on a larger area in a city region basis, not only the city. And here the focus is 32% amount is for air quality improvement and 68% on sanitation. Both are interlinked. For mitigation of carbon, the sanitation efforts go a long way. And another 87,000 crore is for 3,000 plus towns with performance assessment. So the towns which are not performing, will lose their amount for that particular year. Awarding the performance is the focus, and grassroots action. So basically, this allocation provides a chance to the towns to take up actions on air quality improvement and water and sanitation. Another important initiatives are application of UN-led Race to Zero campaign in Maharashtra. The government of Maharashtra has committed to apply it in 43 towns in Maharashtra. Gujarat and Bihar, the other two states, are also planning initiatives towards Race to Zero. Drive to deregister to eliminate end of use live vehicles in Delhi with cooperation of 7 partners. So this is going to be something, a model to adopt what Delhi is going to do, whereby the vehicle owner will be paid per kilo value, and scientific processing of CND waste in particularly Delhi, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, etc., are very important initiatives which will go a long way. Other initiatives are creation of solid SPV, special purpose vehicle for solid waste management in Bangalore, which is first case of its kind in India. And this SPV has started functioning from 1st July 2021. South Municipal Corporation of Delhi identified 9 sites for parking commercial vehicles. This is something, another initiative which need wider replication to restrict parking on roads, keep the road available. And Chennai has several innovations along with other towns for revival of lakes and water harvesting. Delhi Master Plan 2041 give focus on mobility and waste management, so which is going to be applied since this year with all these initiatives which are taken in India and elsewhere. Uh, in addition to this, Committee on uh, Air Quality Management set up by the Government of India for National Capital Region, which has 5 towns most polluted in the globe, has prepared exhaustive checklist on monitoring dust mitigation, which forms part of 2.10 along with carbon, and it has wider implications on health, environment, and productivity. A web portal for construction activities is to be prepared. Upload the builders and house owners are expected to upload self declaration fortnightly, and action on violation of dust norms would be taken. And this is applicable to houses equal to or more than 500 square meter plot. Then a roadmap, what we need in India particularly, we need a state urban transport policy which covers ELVs, parking, and make roads available, and promote the electric vehicles, which will reduce carbon emission. A state plan for zero carbon cities, like something which is initiated in Maharashtra, and NCTD, particularly on traffic and transport issues, rejuvenate water bodies so that greenery is widened, environment friendly building construction, and CND waste. It is particularly important in our country where but after December, you can say till September, October, dust is dominating due to heat and other effects. Then triple R and circular economy, which has wider potential. Circular economy from water, from waste, segregation of waste, from processing of kitchen waste, which can produce organic manure. So this creates a circular economy which has wider potential, wide potential for revival of economy, which the countries are struggling after COVID. So urban economy will have substantial addition if 3R is incorporated into different actions. Then plantation drive and census of trees, it is done in New Delhi Municipal Committee, it is done in Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation. So these are bits and pieces, but we need a statewide approach whereby different states commit towards race to zero and take appropriate actions. And finally, the revised master plan. We need to revise master plans on the lines something what Delhi has done with green and blue development as important and one of the prime focus areas. Some photos, this is dollar colony from Bangalore, where in neighborhood, the kitchen waste is processed and it creates manure, which is used for uh, environment friendly farming.
Andaji, sum up quickly, please.
Okay, sir. And this is another photo of processing. This is green leaf processing, which is a problem. And these very simple, easy instruments are there, which can process within garbage segregation is equally important, which is done at ward level in Bangalore and other cities may also try with the NGOs and the private sector involvement. So thank you very much with these points.
Thank you, Dr. Pandey, for very comprehensive and very, I would say that informative presentation on actions that are being taken by some of our cities and states and policies at a national level. I'd now like to invite Mrs. Sunita Sanghi, former Principal Advisor, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. She has been advisor in Niti Aayog with the urban vertical, which she was handling. Professionally an economist belonging to the Indian Economic Service. She is going to speak mainly on India's approach for decarbonizing urban spaces. There is a lot that is being done. There is a lot that needs to be done. And I think that's where she is going to really enlighten us on what is really happening in our country, very particularly with our commitments to the Paris Declaration of 2015. Yeah. Mrs. Sanghi, please. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kulwant. Let me at the outset thank the AIA-LSG and the Airways for inviting me for this particular session. And I feel this has come at a very appropriate time. Just about 2 days ago, the Honorable Prime Minister has launched the second version of your program and also the waste management. Let me just start. I think Dr. K.K. Pandey has already given a practical perspective of what Government of India and the state governments are doing as far as creating decarbon urban spaces and reducing the carbon footprints. Let me just talk to you about the theoretical part in the sense, the policies that have been initiated at the central level and many more initiatives that have been taken to ensure that our carbon footprints are minimized while at the same time we are not compromising on the economic development. Because largely what has happened is that the countries which are developed today, when they were developing, they were the ones who were creating a lot of carbon emission. And today's many of the problems that of climate change may be a result of that. Today, when we are started developing and we are wanting our people to have a better quality of life, our development process may also create a situation where there are excess carbon footprints, but then if you look at the data, even today, in terms of a per capita country emissions, what we are emitting is less than half of what is the global average. This is what my first slide indicated. We are emitting around 1.940 CO2 per capita in a country, whereas at a global average, it is 4.2. And given the fact that the urbanization is giving a huge opportunity into India, because in 2011, we were 31%, and it is expected that by 2030, we will be close to around 50% of the population, because large number of people are migrating from the rural setting to the urban areas. They may be the census town where they are coming, and they may where the facilities may not be up to the mark, but then they are coming and they are creating an urban space, and that is going to put a pressure on the resources and may create a situation where we have large carbon footprint. But then we are also looking at trying to maintain the Sustainable Development Goals 6 and 7, which looks at and focuses on making our cities and human settlement inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. With that in objective, in Paris, when India signed the Paris Agreement, the focus was on ensuring that we have a healthy and a sustainable way of living, because people who are coming to our urban cities should have a healthy and sustainable way of life. They should be in a position to adopt a climate-friendly and cleaner path for the economic development. We are also able to reduce our intensity of GDP, the emission intensity of GDP, to 35% by 2030. And we are able to use more and more renewable sources of energy instead of focusing on using more of fossil resources. And we are also thinking about looking at adapting the climate change resilient practices by enhancing our investment in sectors which are more vulnerable to climate change, whether it is agriculture, whether it is our coastal regions, whether it is our Himalayan region, or it is the water resources or the disaster management. Now, in terms of the urban areas, what does this Paris Agreement means when it comes to India? Now, what I feel is that when we have to crystallize the Paris Agreement, and when we have to actually meet our commitments in terms of the Paris Agreement, we really have to ensure that we have a sustainable neighborhoods. We also have to ensure that we have efficient, low-cost energy. We are able to have more green belts. We are able to reduce the travel times. In a city like Delhi or Bangalore, you visit these cities, and I had a very tough time in Bangalore. I mean, going from one part of a city to the other part of a city, it absolutely takes more than 2 hours, maybe just about 3 kilometers. So that's a type of transport facilities that are available. And they are the sources of more and more carbon emission. Then we will have to utilize our resources in such a fashion that we are able to reduce the waste. It may be those kind of resources which are easy to get themselves actually compose themselves, and they are easy to decompose. And we have to ensure that we are able to use our land very efficiently. And on top of everything, the use of technology, whether it's blockchain, whether it is Internet of Things, whatever. When we have to ensure that all these things, we are using the technology in a big way. Now, what is it that the low carbon approach then to achieve all these that I have just indicated? What is it that we are encompassing in terms of a low carbon approach so that we are able to meet our commitments? We are today in a national action plan on climate change. We are focusing on renewable energy, including solar, wind. We're also focusing on promoting the energy efficiency. There is focus on sustainable habitat. Professor K.K. Pandey has talked about using the construction waste and other things. We are also focusing on making available potable drinking water, and then improving the forest cover, ensuring that we have a sustainable agriculture. Our practices are such that we are using less of chemicals in our agriculture on one hand. At the same time, we are able to have the productivity increase so that we are able to fulfill the requirement of our own population. And all these things need to be supported by research, because unless and until we are able to have a perfect kind of a research, how do you use the renewable energy? How do you ensure that less than fossils are used? How do you ensure that there are more and more sustainable habitat and improved forest cover? Everything depends on the kind of research that we are doing. And this is the plan that is facilitating and that is going to facilitate our meeting the targets that we have set for ourselves. Now, when it comes to the renewable energy, what we are focusing on use of cleaner modes of energy, both for lighting purposes as well as also for the cooking purposes. We know that in India, large number of people in the rural area, particularly in the far-off rural areas, have been using firewood. And it has two disadvantages. One, it is bad for the health of the women who is doing the cooking. It creates a lot of emissions. Two, it is reducing our forest cover. So by using the renewable sources of energy, we are able to save not only our forests, we are able to save the health of our 50% of the population. Now, towards this, there is a national solar mission which aims to exploit the solar energy potential that a country like India has. And the kind of resources that we have and the kind of incentive that the government of India is providing are huge, both for the commercial purposes as also for the housing purposes. The incentives and subsidies are provided to those who are using and setting up these solar energy plants. Now, there are focus on round-the-clock renewable power supply, so that because you need to have a strong grid system, you may be able to produce the solar energy, but unless and until you're able to save the excess through the grid ecosystem, there's going to be a waste. So there is focus on round-the-clock renewable power supply. But there are challenges that the solar market is facing, especially due to the COVID situation. There are disrupted supply chain, maybe because of the photovoltaic batteries are not coming, maybe there is a lack of availability of labor, but yet there is a huge focus on the solar mission. There's also focus on the ethanol, which is one of the ethanol mission has been initiated so that we are able to use more and more non-fossil based energy sources, and we are able to reduce our carbon footprint on the one hand, and we are able to maintain our economic development. Now, as regards the energy efficiency, it is very, very critical so that because we need to save our energy and we also need to increase the access to the energy. In the last couple of years, in the 7 years since 2015, there has been an improved access as far as energy is concerned. The lights are concerned in every nook and corner of the country, whether it is through the Ujjwala scheme or whether it is through the Ministry of Power scheme, there has been an increase in the availability of energy. Now, how is it possible? It has been made possible by using the energy efficient resources. Now, Bureau of Energy Efficiency has brought out its own energy conservation building codes, which sets the building standards both for the commercial building as well as also for the domestic use. And there are state agencies which are certifying, and they are implementing and they're enforcing these codes. In August 2020, there were 13 states which are far ahead and who have already implemented these energy efficiency codes. Now, the second important sector which is responsible for the carbon emission is the transport sector. And transport, the urbanization increases the need for better and faster in transport sector. Now, it is accounting for close to about 16% of total carbon equivalent, as also the particulate matter. Most of the Indian cities, Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, we are facing, especially during the winter season, Delhi faces the problem of smoke. And I was staying in a place called Bapanagar near the Delhi High Court. Even during the daytime, we used to have our floors filled with carbon. And it used to be so bad that we used to feel that how much carbon are we inhaling. Now, that is why we are now bringing in more and more better mobility sources, whether it is electric vehicles, or we have the Bharat Stage 6 vehicular and fuel emission standards, which aim at reducing the carbon emissions. Now, we have ramped up our investment in electric mobility significantly. And under the FAME 2, we are providing huge investment in subsidies and incentives so that more and more charging stations on highways are also set up, and more people are moving to the electric mobility. There are 8 states who have already published their tariffs for the electric vehicle charging. And recently, Niti Aayog and World Resource Institute has entered into an agreement, and they have jointly launched a forum for decarbonizing the transport in India. That shows the commitment of India, how far we want to decarbonize our urban spaces through one or the other sector. Not only that, the mass rapid transit system through the Indian metros or the Indian railways are also focusing on net zero carbon emission by 2030. When it comes to the building sector, we are focusing on the green building. We have 2 rating systems, LEED as well as the GRIA. And there are many government buildings which are green building. There is a CBI building in Lodi Road, which is completely green building. You don't require during the daytime any electricity. It's a glass building. Even Niti Aayog, where I was working during my time in 2018 itself, Niti was also declared partially a green building because we were using energy. It was declared an energy efficient building because large number of appliances which we were using were all energy efficient. Now, how do we support? Professor Pandey has already given the practical aspect of what we are doing. But let me just talk to you about the kind of schematic and the programmatic intervention that the government of India has brought in. It is through the smart city mission, whether at the pan city level or area development level, that large number of programs have been initiated to ensure that we are able to improve the livability, the quality of life. We are able to have a sustainable work culture, and we are able to have an equilibrium between natural and the built environment. That is because the core principle on which the smart city mission is based is that we have community at the core. We are focusing on efficient resource utilization, and there's an integration of innovation and sustainability, and focuses on use of technology. Then there is a Swachh Bharat mission. Now, the Swachh Bharat mission has twofold objective: to have achieved the 100% open defecation free status, and also to have scientifically processing solid waste system in all statutory towns in the country. My presentation just talks about that how many states and how many ULBs have already actually become ODF free, and how many compost plants have been. There are around 1311 waste to compost plant have already been set up. And there are a large number of waste to energy plants, biogas, biomethanation plants, which are functional in the country. They're all looking at making urban spaces less carbon. And then the success, however, depends upon how the citizens participate, how citizens behave. Because there needs to be a lot of behavioral change as far as citizen is concerned, in terms of not throwing the waste on the road, segregating the waste at source, so that it becomes very easier to adopt these measures. The another mission that is focusing on is the Atal mission for rejuvenating the urban and urban transformation. It's basically to ensure that every household has access to the potable water. It is also to ensure that there is a sewerage connection and it is not on the roads. It also ensures that there's a stormwater drain so that there is no flooding, and also improve the amenity value of cities by developing the greenery, and there are well-maintained open spaces. This particular program is also focusing that there is a lot of walking and cycling space, because of late it has been noticed as most cities, even in Delhi, you go to various parts of Delhi, people have increased their own personal houses on the roads. So there is no walkable places as far as pedestrians are concerned. So this Atal Innovation Mission is focusing that there are walking and cycling spaces. And the beauty of this particular mission is that it gives flexibility to the state to make their own program and to focus on whatever they want to focus on within the objective that they would like to achieve. There is going, I think in 2019, a decarbonization bill was introduced in the Rajya Sabha, which is looking at setting up of a national decarbon board. And if you look at, it's a proposed, I tried looking into the website to see the current status. I couldn't find out the current status, but this was introduced in 2019 in Rajya Sabha. One of the important aspect of this board is, and that shows that how committed India is, that there is going to be a national decarbon board, of which Honorable Prime Minister is going to be the chairman, and the ministers of large number of ministries whose ministries are working to have better urban spaces are going to be the member. And the aim of this particular board is to meet decarbonization standards by 2030 and then setting targets year on year basis. And also to establish the higher environmental standards. So the short point is that while government has put in place the mechanisms, it has brought in the incentives, it has brought in the schemes, it is we as citizens, we have to ensure that we are able to fulfill our commitments, our duties, so that we are able to make our own urban spaces carbon free. Because government can only show the way, can put in the resources, but it is us, we citizens, who have to take the responsibility of ensuring that our urban spaces are healthy, they are carbon free. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sunita ji, for this wonderful presentation, highlighting the low carbon approach of the government of India, bringing in a lot of energy efficiency, focus on sustainable agriculture, which is the need of the hour today. And then, of course, the increasing focus on renewable sources of energy, including solar, etc. I think it is very important to understand the role which you have underscored of these various missions, whether it is Smart City mission, whether it is Amrut or it is Swachh Bharat mission. They have made a good beginning. There is a need for strengthening those missions, and expanding them in a big way. They do need a lot of investments, basically, because without those investments, it may really not be possible to achieve, I would say that 100%, as a matter of fact, decarbonization that we are really aiming at. The National Decarbon Board, which you have really brought in, and we do hope that this board will certainly play its own role in coming months and years to come. And local governments do have a very vital role to play. We all understand that, because policy is a part at the national and state level. Implementation is a responsibility that of the local governments per se. I now avail this opportunity inviting one of our another distinguished speaker, Madam Deborah Ephraimson. She is the Regional Director, Health Bridge and Executive Director, Institute of Wellbeing, Bangladesh. Interestingly, she is an author of a book publication called Beyond Apologies, Defining and Achieving an Economics of Well-being. And I think that's very, very interesting. As I said earlier, we closely work on a global campaign of car-free cities so that we have carbon-free cities. Basically, I invite Madam Deborah to share her experiences. She's going to talk on advocacy for fuel-free transport with our experiences from Bangladesh, basically. The floor is yours, Deborah.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. It's a pleasure to be here today. Unfortunately, I'm suffering from back pain, so if I don't look my best, that's why. I'm adding a third, third place I work. I'm also an advisor to Work for a Better Bangladesh here in Dhaka. And most of the experiences I'm going to be talking about today are actually the work of WBB Trust, which is why I wanted to mention that. So I talk about fuel-free transport, and you might wonder why I say fuel-free. The typical term is non-motorized, which implies that motorized is the norm and non-motorized is a little thing on the side that's not very important. But actually, the fact that you can move around without fuel, without having to worry about, where you're going to get your so-called clean energy, it's huge, and we need to give it more importance. We also need to acknowledge that we cannot solve the problem of congestion in our cities by prioritizing long trips. We need to acknowledge the importance of shorter trips as well and encourage people. And I think a lot of this has happened with COVID. How do we stay more in our neighborhoods? Even in mega cities, we know that many or most trips are just a few kilometers. So it is ridiculous to believe we need a car or a motorcycle for the trips that are just a few kilometers long. And when we do use public transit, of course, we need to reach it on both ends, where again, walking and cycling are super important, or using rickshaws. And when we talk about carbon-free mobility, we need to start. We don't need to not end with it, but actually start with the trips that can be made by walking and cycling, and give those a lot more importance. Now, I really appreciate all the great initiatives coming from India, but I just have to give a slightly different perspective. I am an American. I am well aware the United States, and I understand this idea of increasing economic growth, trying to resolve poverty, but having grown up in the United States, and as Dr. Singh mentioned, I've written a book about the economics of well-being. The United States, we have high GDP, very high carbon emissions per capita, and a lot of poverty. We have not solved poverty despite how big our economy is. And if you ask American economists, they would say we need more growth. Well, how much more growth can we have? And why isn't the growth solving the poverty? Simple answer, it's making people richer, going from millionaires to billionaires. The pollution gets worse. And when we talk about well-being, there is, having a nice house or a nice apartment, having some luxuries, but there's also things like breathing clean air, having access to clean water, being able to sleep without a lot of noise, being safe, both in terms of crashes and as a woman moving through the city, and avoiding congestion. And if we look at those issues, then they are not going to be solved by increasing GDP. I also just have to say, I completely understand why India and countries like Bangladesh are angry when they are asked to reduce their CO2 emissions, given that countries like America are major contributors. But when you say per capita, you do have to recognize that with over 1 billion people, per capita emissions may be lower, a lot lower, but it's going to add up to a lot. So the question is, how much does increasing GDP, it goes hand in hand with increased carbon emissions. How much is actually helping to reduce poverty, and how much is making the rich richer? So just a little question there. Anyway, when we do focus on fuel-free transport, in this presentation, I work mostly on transport, so that's what I'm focusing on. It can help with so many things. And this is the beauty of a program that actually reduces multiple problems simultaneously, because we have so much that's wrong in our cities and in our world. We can't just pick at things one by one. More fuel-free transport, walking, cycling, rickshaws, bicycle rickshaws would obviously help with the climate crisis. They would reduce the traffic deaths and injuries, air pollution, congestion, dramatically reduce the costs, both to government and to individuals of moving about. Government provides a road, you need a car or a motorbike. Government provides rail-based transport, great infrastructure for walking and cycling. That's also saves government money. It also saves the user money. All of these programs would reduce the social isolation. It's been worse with COVID, but it's been a problem in any case. As cities become more westernized, people don't know their neighbors. We lose that whole sense of community, which is also vital in dealing with disasters. And as we know, we grew up playing outdoors. Today's children often don't have that opportunity. They're really missing out. So why does what I call fuel-free transport have such low priority? The main reason, I would say, is, we talk about status of cars and people want cars or they want motorbikes, but where does that come from? We design cities to make it easy, or at least easier, safer to move about by motorized transport, and we punish people for wanting to move about in environmentally friendly and space efficient means. Why do we do that? Well, one big reason is the intensive lobbying, not just in our countries, this is all around the world. What I call the three-headed monster, which is the road building companies, the fuel companies, and the car companies, heavily lobby our governments to believe that transport means motorized vehicles, and that's what governments should build for, and that's what governments should measure. We also know that projects with a lot of money behind them, they yield power and other benefits to the officials implementing them. I sort of jokingly mentioned, but I think in Bangladesh, I don't know about India, it's still a problem of people using old textbooks or trained in old ways, which includes beliefs that to solve the car related problems, we need to build for the car. We know cities around the world, the more they aim for the car, the worse the congestion gets, the worse the pollution, the worse the crashes. But people still like to say, well, the problem with our Asian cities is they weren't designed for the car, and we just make them worse and worse. So I'm just going to go quickly through a few experiences. As I mentioned, these experiences of Work for a Better Bangladesh. I'm co-founder and advisor. The first one we started in 2004, I believe. The government announced it was going to ban the rickshaw from Mirpur Road. You can see the road in this picture. Rickshaws still in Dhaka account for, I think, about a third of trips. So these are a major source. We're actually the Guinness World Record holder for the percentage of trips by the non-polluting, space-efficient rickshaw. But government officials were saying rickshaws are slow, and unbelievably, they said because they're slow, they slow down the cars, and thus rickshaws are polluting. Craziness. Cars slow down cars. The roads that have no rickshaws are still terribly congested. Rickshaws allow an alternative, which is safer, no slower often than the car. It's not polluting. They're also a huge source of jobs, and they provide convenient door-to-door transport, which is obviously the problem with public transit. In any case, we at WBB, we carried out a major campaign. We got international support from the precursor to Car-Free Cities Alliance, which was the World Car-Free Network, directly targeted World Bank, which had been pushing for these bans. And I can't say that we stopped the rickshaw bans, but we did slow them significantly, which means that rickshaws continue to be a major source of employment and of transport in Dhaka. We also worked on the issue of walking. The belief, I went through all these government documents. When they mention walking, government officials tend not to consider it an important mode of transport. They claim that the main problem is vendors occupying space on the sidewalk, and that the safety issue, a lot of people actually walk in the street because the footpaths are, as you can see, broken or in bad shape. But a lot of people get hit walking in the street because there is no available footpath. But the government said it's all the problem of the lack of footover bridges, even though people hate footover bridges. So we wanted to point out walking is a main form of transport. The problem on the footpaths is a combination of parked cars, poor infrastructure, and then there aren't safe level crossings, people to cross the way they wish. We did a major study on walking. We did a lot of advocacy to improve the walking condition, and there have been some improvements and some increased priority for walking. Similar thing with cycling. Once again, cycling wasn't even mentioned in government transport documents. In fact, although cycling is not a major portion of trips, it is popular among certain groups, certainly among the low income. It is generally much faster than, certainly than moving by bus. It can be faster than, it's actually a lot faster than moving by car most of the time. And it's obviously affordable. We did a bunch of events, held rallies, published different papers, organized seminars. Slowly, there is recognition happening of the importance of bicycles, and the government has created a few, completely inadequate, not connected, but at least started to create a few cycle lanes. The heart of the problem, as we say, is the private car. So we've also really focused on that. The belief that cars are the backbone of transport is a terrible belief that leads to all these problems. We point out repeatedly that cars cause congestion, pollution, danger both in terms of traffic crashes and in terms of danger to women. When you're on a street with nobody out walking or cycling, the street is more dangerous. And of course, they waste a ton of space. Part of why we have no playgrounds almost no playgrounds in the city, no places to play outdoors, is everywhere is dominated by parked cars. We did a years-long campaign to say that cars, not rickshaws, somebody even said walking was the source of congestion. Craziness. We started celebrating World Car Free Day in 2006. Took us 10 years, but the government of Bangladesh has been officially celebrating it since 2016. And I'm not saying we've come a long way, but there is at least slow progress in terms of the idea that actually cars need to be controlled if we're ever going to create a more livable Dhaka. And of course, again, the heart of the bigger issue. So cars are the heart of the transport problem, but the heart of the whole bigger issue is urban planning. There is a belief that zoning, separating uses, increases livability, whereas we know that separating uses is not helpful because it just causes people to have to travel farther, which increases reliance on motorized vehicles and all the problems they cause. So we want to see, and you see in those well-off cities where there are still shops and restaurants on the ground floor, which also subsidize apartments above. This can be done nicely. There's no reason why you can't have mixed use throughout your city in a positive way, 15-minute cities. So we've done, again, policy papers, webinars, worked with media. We have gotten some good policies, but unfortunately, there's still a crazy policy mandating that car parking be provided in every single building. Every car parking space I see in a building, I see it as one less affordable apartment for people who need it. So we're very focused on providing affordable housing for our cars, not so much for our people, which contributes to all of these problems. Quickly, lessons learned. We know that data and facts are important, they're necessary, but they are never enough. We have to understand how and why decisions are made. As I said, the lobbying of the three-headed monster is a big problem. So in all of these areas we work on, we do our own research. Somebody earlier mentioned the importance of research. Absolutely, we need to have research. It needs to be well presented. You need a strong coalition of allies. You need to build the capacity, both of your allies and other people working on these issues through a whole series of different events. We work very closely with media. I've started regularly writing op-eds for some major English dailies here, and we do all kinds of other media work, a lot of advocacy. And behind it all, patience, persistence, strategy, all of these things are necessary because things do not change quickly, but we're still working on it. Again, fuel-free transport would solve not just the carbon, getting us to carbon-free cities, but so many other of our pressing problems could be solved or greatly improved if we would focus on fuel-free transport and the 15-minute city or the 5-minute city. The backbone of urban mobility is not the car. It should be walking, cycling, and cycle rickshaws. Cities that are well designed make it possible to get your basic needs met close by. It should be easier to cross the street than to cross the city. All these efforts to improve the situation for walking and cycling have to be combined with car control, or we will never get there. And carbon-free cities must start with the fuel-free modes and better urban planning. All those other issues, you talked about the buildings and sources of energy. All of those, of course, are important, but we also have to solve our transport, both to make our cities carbon-free and to achieve a decent quality of life. So thank you very much. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, the work for WBB is, you can find it at our website, and that's my email address. And thank you again for inviting me today.
Thank you, Deborah, for such a wonderful presentation. I must say that I think your whole design of your approach of explaining the belief, the reality, the action, and the results. And I think you have very nicely conveyed, I would say, that the problem of three-headed monster, you do need urban planning, right kind of urban planning. And the answer for the sustainable transport, or I would say that livable cities, lies in what you call fuel-free transport or non-motorized transport, whichever way you look at it. I think the planners have to really understand that message very clearly, that you do need pedestrianization, you do need dedicated paths for cyclists, you do need, as a matter of fact, public transport also equally very, very important for longer distances or for I would say that bigger cities, metro cities like Delhi, where without public transport, perhaps mobility will be very, very different. Very surely, I think uh, your other message also goes a long way when you say the facilities, conveniences have to be close where people live. And that's where I would say that the UN Habitat's new urban agenda has really been highlighting the need for mixed land use and not, the kind of master plans based on zonal plans. And I would say like that, we have to really have a paradigm shift there. And that's where perhaps I think your messages are very well clear. I would like to now honestly move on. We are a little behind schedule, but I like to invite Mr. Rajiv Vij, who has worked with Global Innovation and Technology Alliance for a pretty long time. It was a joint venture PPP company. He subsequently moved to UNIDO and worked as director of UNIDO for several years in the International Center for Inclusive and Sustainable Industrial Development, New Delhi. Presently, Rajiv is independently providing consulting services in the areas of project management, technology and innovation capacity building, resource efficiency and cleaner production, circular economy, CSR and advocacy and outreach, etc. Kriyanvit Consulting is the name of his organization, and he is going to, in a way, share his thoughts for enhancing resource efficiency and circular economy towards sustainable urbanization. He brings with him decades of experience, wherein perhaps I think we'll like to benefit from his presentation, short presentation. I welcome Mr. Rajiv Vij. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Singh. And I thank EILSG and 3R Waste Foundation for giving me this opportunity. And it's really fortunate to be here on this World Habitat Day and amongst the eminent panelists. So I would just like to give some overview of what earlier speakers have already talked about, but just for a short glimpse. So India is the second largest urban system in the world, with almost 11% of the total urban population living in Indian cities. Urban growth is expected to continue to 73% of the total population increase by 2036. And India is projected to have 53% of the national population, and by addition of 416 million urban dwellers by the year 2050. Nearly 44% of India's rapidly growing carbon emissions have urban origins, emanating from transport, industry, buildings, and waste, contributing towards climate change, which earlier speakers have also talked about. Industrial production has grown in India by more than 50-fold, and there are 17 categories of most polluting industries which contribute to the environment in terms of suspended particulate matter, gases, and effluents. About 77% industries contribute to water pollution, 50% to air pollution, and remaining 8% to both air and water pollution. So as per the NDC, the goal is to reduce intensity of country's GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030, in accordance with the Paris Agreement, which earlier speakers have also pointed out. And urban areas hold a key in such massive emission reduction. International Economic Agency estimates that nearly 60% of its CO2 emissions in the late 2030 will be coming from infrastructure and machines that do not exist today. That means in future, you have more machines, you have more infrastructure, and that is how it is going to contribute more towards the CO2 emissions. India is set to see the largest increase in energy demand of any country over the next 20 years. This has potential for policies and investment to accelerate clean energy transition and steer the country onto a more secure and sustainable course. So as far as the initiatives which government has taken, and earlier speakers have talked about that, towards sustainable urbanization. SDG 11 is National Action Plan on Climate Change, National Mission on Sustainable Habitat, which has flagship missions like Amrut, Swachh Bharat missions, Smart Cities Mission, Urban Transport Program. So successful implementation of the above flagship missions has a potential for mitigation of GHG emission amount to 133 million tons equivalent by 2021 and 270 million tons by 2031. So in terms of enhancing energy and resource efficiency, the National Resource Efficiency Policy of India envisages to cover all resources, environmental aspects, and all sectors across all life stages necessary for sustainable development, which include priority resources and materials, metal, non-metallic, minerals, air, water, land, biomass, fossil fuels. Sectors which are predominantly contributing to this could be construction, transport, plastic, packaging, electrical and electronic equipment, agriculture, metal industry, textile, renewable energy, food, and waste, which include municipal solid waste, plastic packaging, waste, electrical and electronic equipment, and industrial waste. So in terms of this resource efficiency and cleaner production, because all these industries, they are contributing to the pollution. And so there are different ways of addressing these challenges. So the resource efficiency and cleaner production tries to tackle the economic aspects, environmental aspect, and social aspects. And in this context, the Industry 4.0 and the adoption of the emerging technologies has a very crucial role to play. So these are some of the green tech initiatives and trends in India, which earlier speakers have also pointed out. So International Energy Agency predicts that India will emerge as a leader in the renewable energy sector, third in the world energy consuming country with rising incomes and standards of living. In the world economic technology will $1 in 7 spent globally on solar PV, wind turbine, and lithium-ion battery storage going to Indian companies by 2040. India's renewable energy capacity has crossed 1 lakh megawatt mark, though it will fall short of 2022 target of 175 gigawatts. Now, in terms of the potential of circular economy in India, circular economy principles can save around 624 billion worth of economic value in India by 2050. GHG emissions could be 23% lower in 2030 and 44% lower in 2050 compared to with the current development scenario. And key focus areas for circularity include cities and construction, food and agriculture, and mobility and vehicle manufacturing. So in terms of what possible approaches and could be adopted towards circular economy, and in cities and construction, we could look at design methods for modular buildings, retrieving materials left over after construction and demolition work and keeping them in cycles. Water usage in the construction industry could be 19% lower in 2030 and 24% lower in 2050. In terms of mobility and vehicle manufacturing, which earlier speakers have talked about, and of course, it is important to go for this non-fuel modalities, but at the same time the projections are that the vehicle use would increase, so we need to have multimodal mobility systems, innovative business models, better product designs, zero emission vehicles, enhancing fuel efficiency, and reverse logistics. In the area of food and agriculture, reducing food waste across the supply chain, urban and peri-urban farming can bring food production closer to consumption, reducing food waste and transportation requirements. And in this all this endeavor, we need to have leverage this digital technology to enable the circular economy. Capacity building, multi-stakeholder collaborations, and fostering innovation will be the key to this journey. Now, in terms of the construction and demolition waste, India generates an estimated 150 million tons of C&D waste per year, and unofficial estimates are 3 to 5 times higher. However, the recycling capacity is meager 6,005 tons per day. Under the National Clean Air Program, cities have to reduce their particulate pollution by 20 to 30% by 2024. However, toxic dust particles from debris continue to pollute air. A significant proportion of construction waste can be recycled and reused and brought back to the construction to substitute naturally resource material. Swachh Bharat Mission has recognized the need for C&D waste management. Ranking points for C&D waste management for Swachh Sarvekshan 2021 have been doubled to 100 points, divided equally between management infrastructure and waste processing efficiency. So earlier speakers have also talked about this municipal solid waste. So government has taken several initiatives which has ensured significant progress in the waste management in urban areas. New rules for solid waste management introduced in 2016 encourage the construction and use of waste to energy plants through the provision of adequate subsidies or incentives with the provision for integration of informal workers. Now, I think plastic waste is a big challenge in India, and India generates around 26,000 tons of plastics every day from urban areas. As per CPCB reports, plastic waste on an average accounts for 6.92% of MSW. So what could be the possible approaches and solutions? Incentivize recycling, innovative economic models, biodegradable plastics, waste processing, composting, RDF, co-processing of RDF, plastic waste in cement kilns, etc., life cycle assessment, plastic footprinting. And in terms of the e-waste, India is obviously the world's third biggest e-waste generator, producing over 3.23 million metric ton of e-waste per year, behind US and China. 95% of e-waste is still handled by the informal sector. And what could be the possible approaches and solutions? Set up advanced stage recycling to recover critical materials, precious metals, and handle hazardous fractions and dismantling. Sampling labs, on-ground common facility for understanding material content, model unit for dismantling and recycling of e-waste, incentives to set up advanced recycling units and eco-parks, recycling units and electrical and electronic equipment clusters. So these are some of the areas I've touched upon. Of course, there's a lot of potential and there are lots of opportunities and challenges, but I thought I'll just quickly sum up in this given time of 10 minutes. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajiv ji. I think there is excellent thought that you have tried to put forward on there's a need to, I would say, enhance resource efficiency and cleaner production. All through, you have tried to highlight the whole idea of circular economy, whether it is waste or otherwise. There's no doubt what you have said, that Industry 4.0 will have a vital role. The technology is going to play, in, I would say, coming years, a very, very vital role. Renewable energy, we have made greater strides, though we may not be able to achieve the targets that you have really highlighted. It's also because we got some setback. Solar production, we have reached a kind of plateau, if I may say so. Perhaps I think the progress is rather now very tardy, but we really have to really move forward in that direction. All that you have highlighted on the multimodal transport system, addressing the challenges of waste management, whether it is plastic or e-waste or C&D waste or municipal waste, or even now biomedical waste in a very big way. All that becomes very important. If we address these challenges, you do increase resource efficiency, bring in resource efficiency, and in so doing, perhaps I think you are able to contribute to making the I would say, cities more carbon free as far as one really visualizes it. Perhaps I think, there are always challenges that these cities are facing, no doubt about it, but those challenges will have to be faced, by better policies, by better implementation, and I think more investments also. Let's not let's not forget that while it is a responsibility of the local governments, they have a major financial crunch in addressing these. So if you are just depending on the central government or the state government policies and transfer of funds, perhaps I think the local governments may not be able to perform to the level they should really perform. They have to generate their own resources also and bring in greater efficiency in their own systems. We are moving towards our last speaker, if I may say so, and we are moving to another interesting city of this country. Madam Saskriti Menon, she is the senior director in the Center for Environment Education based in Pune, and she has been working in several sectors, addressing the issue, I think, and she is going to make a presentation with sharing some very interesting experiences emerging from the city of Pune. The floor is yours, Sanskriti. I think I really don't have to say much about. Your title, as you said, is Action for Climate Empowerment, Civic Initiatives in the city of Pune. So how are you going to empower? Are you going to empower local governments, or are you going to empower citizens themselves, or the communities? Perhaps I think we'd like to learn more from Pune's experiences in this regard. Yes, floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Kulwant. And it was very interesting for me to listen to Professor Pandey and Sunita ji and Rajiv ji to show the structural things, or the policy initiatives and the institutional initiatives that are taking place. And really, these are very well taken. These are the macro decisions that are needed to go into the low carbon path. And my friend Deborah, I think she brings in, and I think what I'm going to say is very akin to what Deborah has highlighted also, that the public and the people whose lives we are talking about, how do they really become part of the change that we are looking for? What is the transformation that we are looking for? How are they really part of it? And the idea of action for climate empowerment, in fact, comes also from the UNFCCC itself. And I'll just share my screen now and share some of these ideas. Dr. Kulwant, are you able to see the
Yes, please.
presentation?
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm trying to just
Yes.
make it in presentation mode. Yes, okay. So just a word about CEE. We were founded as a Center of Excellence of the Ministry of Environment and Forests, as really looking at environmental education and public awareness as a key element of environmental protection and conservation, and really integrating environmental understanding into the development agenda of the country. And so we do have quite a number of educational programs which are related to school and youth education, college education, as well as capacity building. So it's both formal and working with communities and with institutional stakeholders and industry and business stakeholders, community stakeholders in different settings, urban and rural, as well as in different sectors like biodiversity and water and sanitation, waste management, and transport, which have been quite the focus of the discussion this morning. And we are also working in very many different settings across the country. I mean, from the coastal marine areas to the Himalayan region. So the climate change education approaches that we've been looking at are really, the vision is to engage decision makers and support vulnerable communities and empower the interested stakeholders to build this low carbon, climate resilient society and sustainable living that we desire. And the term, as I mentioned, Action for Climate Empowerment, it is very much part of the Article 6 of the UNFCCC and Article 12 of the Paris Agreement. And our methodology and approaches are also guided by the ACE ideas, which are related to education, awareness, training, public awareness, and also, more importantly, the public access to information, public participation, and then cooperation and collaboration both horizontally as well as vertically, because I think the key here is really multi-stakeholder engagement, which is both at a local level as well as regional and national and even supranational, because best practices are to be found across the globe. And just to share, quite a range of different things that are happening in terms of how the ideas and the information and good practices of climate change, climate action. So something like the Biodiversity Express or the Science, the Climate Action Express, the Science Express. This was a train, it was running across India for 8 months of the year, over several years. And the idea was to actually reach the message in many different interactive ways. And of course, social media plays a large role in this today. But we should remember that a large part of the country, and especially women, are not connected on social media. And we really have to look at innovative ways of reaching the message and understanding out of what the world and the country and the region and our localities are facing as regards the ecological and climate emergency that we have today. Again, the larger scale sort of more priming or, informing that there is an issue and connecting with the people. This needs to be, of course, linked up with more engaged action. And again, like something like this initiative that we taken a couple of years ago, which is the Climate Literacy and Marine Litter Management campaign. It ran in a campaign mode, but it had also localized actions that were to be taken in terms of, what happens at fish landing sites. And even if you have cleaned up the coast one day, you will find that, the sea is going to give you back plastic. And what are you going to do? And so working with fisher folk to say that, why fishing gear should not be abandoned in the sea, to looking at how coastal regions and of course upstream areas also need to manage waste so that plastic is not reaching the ocean. So, but that requires that you actually set up waste management facilities. So beyond the larger sort of messages of, do this, do that, or don't do this or do that, or good practice, there is more engaged action required at the locality level, area level, to set up the systems to, manage waste better. Similarly, something, which has been quite remarkably successful over the COVID months of last year and even this year, is this plastic tide turners challenge, which engaged, 150,000-60,000 young people across the country, looking at, sensitizing them to the idea of waste management, but also engaging them to study their own localities, connect with different stakeholders, talk to people who are in waste management services, and really go into the nitty-gritty of what the issues are and how you can engage them. And through this process, actually, we were able to identify youth leaders from across the country, and now looking at ways of, connecting them further in more engaged ways. And so the idea is that while we put up the policy and we put up, programs and schemes, we also need to have this element of engaging with the public in ways that are reaching and innovative and interesting and really empowering rather than debilitating. We are not only talking about the doomsday, but actually showing what is possible to do and engaging people in positive actions and in the decisions that are related to those positive actions. And this is also something that is borne out by, the studies that are there on, what motivates people, what is of interest to people in, when you're hearing these messages of the climate crisis and the ecological crisis, what is the way forward? And through this study with the Global Center on Adaptation that CE did along with FEE and CAI Analytics, the priming of their own experience of extreme events and personal experiences of climate change. These are drivers of young people to look for solutions. But because there are often not so many opportunities that young people and even regular people, ordinary citizens, to get involved in governance or policy processes, this becomes a hurdle for people to actually create solutions. But when the opportunities are given, people, especially young people, are able to contribute to decision making and really create and contribute through this idea of the intergenerational justice and equity, solutions that are workable. Because India is a young country, I think the studies of this nature should really inform the way that we are looking at the policy and the programs and the schemes, how they get implemented on ground, but also in the creation of these policies and programs and schemes, because younger people have the greatest stakes in the solutions that are being devised today. And our failure to actually do the public engagement in not just I transmit the message, I'm done with it, or I transmit over social media, I'm done with it, but in actual conversations of change and transformation, that is key to making a success of the transformation that we desire. And in just 2-3 days' time is the local conference of youth, and this is part of the official constituency of the UNFCCC. C has been hosting this for the past few years, and the LCOI for South Asia and India is happening in a couple of days' time. And I think these are some ways that young people can get involved, but LCOI is one element, and we need a lot more at every city, every village, every region level for people to be engaged in the transformation that is needed. I'm happy to also share that with All India Institute of Local Self-Government and UNICEF, the government of Maharashtra had in fact commissioned the creation of this Maji Vasundhara curriculum. And again, over the COVID months, of the last few months since January, we've been working to create activities and projects to engage students in actually exploring the environment and looking for solutions. I just want to share a couple of examples from Pune, which show the necessity of this engaged kind of action. Again, in the recent months, of course, all cities, all regions in the country, not only India, everybody is looking to recover from the impacts of COVID. And through this, framework that was provided by the UNCDF, we also did the study in Pune, and it looks at these, what are the characteristics of the city which lend resilience or not, or otherwise, and we did the study with experts and with local stakeholders, especially informal sector groups, and we find that our proposition that we will have a better life or a better recovery from the pandemic, it is getting impaired because we don't have social protection of labor. It is getting impaired because we don't have the public services and infrastructure, the connectivity. The people need to get to work, and if the modes are not there, that is really going to impair recovery. And certainly some things have been said by Deborah about city planning and how engaged are we in city planning. And if city governance is not following the larger policy changes of that we are looking to shift to walk cycle or low carbon modes, then and this transition is not easy for a lot of people, that how tomorrow will I start walking, cycling and taking public transport when the bus is not there, and who's deciding about the bus. So I think this needs to be seen in an integrated way, in a systems way, and the action for climate empowerment approaches, the engagement approaches need to be designed keeping the systems view in place. Pune is famous for the Swachh example, and this is in fact a civil society initiative which then collaborated with the Pune Municipal Corporation, the Waste Pickers initiative, which the PMC then took on as a cooperative of waste pickers to provide doorstep services for the city of Pune. And by Swachh's own, calculations, the kind of savings that have happened because of this decentralized approach, so segregation approach, and the recovery of recyclables. 8 lakh tons of CO2 emissions have been avoided, and there's been considerable economic savings to the city because of the presence of the Waste Pickers Collective. But again, we've CE's also been collaborating with them, and we're looking to enhance certain segments of recovery, including sanitary waste, which forms a fair segment of the municipal solid waste that is generated. And the idea is to be actually able to recover the superabsorbent polymer from sanitary napkins and diapers. But this requires that you actually set up the processes of communication and set up the systems, the logistic systems of keeping so segregated waste separate till it is taken to the processing facility. And another study, again, COVID time study with the University of Georgia and the Resilient Cities Network, and a program called the Urban Ocean, which is looking at how materials are coming into the city, how much is, what kinds of materials are used by the community, what is the product design, are they amenable to recyclability, reusability or not? What are the collection systems, what happens at the end of cycle, how much is the leakage? And what are the products and processes that we need to be concerned about. And this had some pretty interesting revelations for Pune. And I mean, of course, the issue of multi-layer plastic has been mentioned, and that extended producer responsibility is essential to be able to put in place, both funding and systems for capturing this material, and redesign of products and processes is also essential. And so we were able to document some of this in Pune over the last few months. And now we are looking at exploring some of these opportunities for of business models, and even looking at, I think Professor Pandey had shared the composting examples, very interesting ones. But how do you take it large scale? What are the spaces in the city? Are they to be done in bulk waste generator sites or in community sites? I think that requires detailed planning in discussion with communities. And again, what happens with the scrap market itself, because recovery of materials is a necessity for us to decarbonize, but the scrap markets are very much informal. There is a lot of occupational difficulties, occupational challenges. It's a hazardous business. But what is the effort being put in? And it's very competitive because the margins are also very low, and it's so informal. Of course, we want to make it formalized. Of course, worker benefits or worker conditions need to improve. But who's going to do that? And how is that trust going to develop in something which is been seen as really operating in the edges of the city and out of the purview of the formal economy? And here we feel that absolutely the multi-stakeholder approaches will be needed for the trust and collaboration that you need to make a success of recovery of recyclables and EPR systems. Again, in the area of sustainable mobility, which has been a topic for many of the speakers today, in Pune, the comprehensive mobility plan was made in the JNNURM times in 2006, and it was finally approved by the general body in 2012. It has this vision that walk, cycle, and public transport would be the major modes of transport, and private motorized modes would be just 10%. And of course, saying this and actually putting this in place, there is quite a lot of work to be done. Fortunately, I mean, these are the components which looks at the mobility corridors, the traffic management, public transport to be put in place, walk and cycle, demand management to actually reduce the usage of private transport. All of these are elements of the CMP, and all of these need to be put in place, and some of these are getting put in place, but they are fraught with difficulty. It's not easy. For example, the bus rapid transit in Pune and Pimpri-Chinchwad, it was supposed to be a 100-kilometer network. We have the colored corridors developed so far over the last 10 years or so. However, they're also being replaced by metro. And it's yet to be seen that will the BRT system and the metro system work together or not? What will happen? How is the last mile connectivity happening? Is it happening? Who's making sure it's happening? Are these entities all working together or not? And it takes a lot of civil society engagement to work with the municipality, the bus system and other actors, the traffic police, the RTO, to keep this focus on walk-in, cycle, and public transport, and the making systems that actually work for the public. We were involved in the public outreach for the bus rapid transit, and it gave us quite a lot of insights into what are people looking for, what kind of information, what modes to use of information, because there's so much stuff around you. There's messaging gets lost, and how will you actually reach? What are effective ways of community engagement, and actually also looking at what the municipality itself or the institutional actors are learning from past experience, and how does that get continued into the learnings that are needed to continue the innovations. So I think all of these are necessary when we say action for climate empowerment at the implementation level. These are elements which are often not thought of in policy directives and in schemes, etc., which they must be. Again, like street design initiatives under the Smart City Initiative, as well as Pune had its own Pune Streets program, and very nice streets have been created, some kilometers. To take it city scale will require a lot of effort. Again, when city spaces are created like this, they do get taken over by parking, and you will require many different elements of the ecosystem of transportation to come together to actually build the faith that we can transition. I have to change my mode of transport from a car or a bike. Will this work for me? That decision has to be taken by people every day and actually contribute to the change. What I'm saying is that unless we have those forums of public deliberation, of sharing that, this is the vision, and the vision is at a very broad scale. What does that vision mean in my area? We need to have those forums, and those forums today are hardly there. What shall I say, advocacy is really that we should have these systems in place for the localized conversation to take place, which is also responding to this global challenge and a very local challenge as well. Again, for cycling, which we are saying that, so Pune did create a bicycle plan with the Ministry of Urban Development support in 2015, 16, 17. And, mode share has fallen from, over 20% in 1981 to less than 3% in the time that we created the bicycle plan. The bicycle plan in Pune is really looking for creating a citywide cycle infrastructure, which is safe and connected. And for that also advocated for, or one of the elements is to create a bicycle department at the PMC, that is institutional capacity, the infrastructure, mobility planning, which is cycle inclusive, regulation and enforcement, as well as outreach and promotion, which means that there is engaged action in this transition, and that the municipality actually needs to set up systems for outreach and promotion. We are yet waiting for those systems to be set up. There is some movement, and I think the PMC itself also would need support systems and the funding that they need to put in place to implement the bicycle plan. Again, building at even more bottom up, there are concerned citizens because, of course, people are reading about the climate crisis. They do want to do their bit too. And the Bavdan Citizens Forum, is a group that has been doing car-free Sundays every month, by sort of vehicle-free Sundays every month. But last month, in discussion, I asked them, because it was car-free day last on 22nd September. So earlier in September, we thought we'll run a survey to ask that how do people actually commute? It's well and good to have a car-free Sunday on one Sunday of the month, but what's your everyday commute like? And sure enough, it is quite a lot private transport, And what are the reasons for not using the bus? Quite a lot of people don't even know that, what are the bus services there. And so what we are looking for doing now is, looking at these nudge-based approaches, working with the PMPML, that is the bus service provider, and the PMC and the Pune Knowledge Cluster, and Safe Pune Traffic Movement and CE and other NGOs to really see that, which are the bus routes where the bus facility is good, but people don't know about it, or which are the routes where there is a lot of demand, but the bus is not there, or which are the routes where last mile connectivity is not there. And can we do these both information and facility-based nudges in discussion with the institutional actors so that we can solve the problem block by block, area by area, as well as at a systemic level, as we learn, what creates the change and what creates the transformation. So that's what I would like to say, that, policy, legislation, financial instruments, enforcement and technology, as our earlier speakers have said, are really great structural change instruments. But education and action for climate empowerment, we see that as really the driver of drivers, which makes all of these things happen in the first place and become effective as they roll out on the ground. So the plea is, let's keep public engagement and really plan for action for climate empowerment as a key element of the transformation that we are seeing towards low carbon cities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sanskriti, for this excellent presentation, sharing your thoughts of how do we really bring in climate empowerment. And you very rightly put it that, there are policies well in place, but until and unless people are engaged, until and unless communities are engaged, they will not really be able to, local governments will not really be able to implement them. And it is true that we have to really increase what you said, climate literacy. For example, in the case of marine litter management campaign, it's so very important, basically that. And your Center for Environment Education has been doing so much, engaging not only with the governments but also with the communities. There is a lot to learn in that way, what Pune has done by other cities. And that's where perhaps I think Pune has achieved a lot, whether it is a question of waste management per se, and whether it is transport, or I would say mobility management. I do recall Pune, as a matter of fact, was, how should I say, was a very successful model for sanitation. Based on their model, a national program called Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan was started somewhere around 2000 or so. And that's mainly also because Pune has attracted some of the wonderful municipal commissioners who, as a matter of fact, have tried to really, put their thoughts together and try to implement them. There's a lot that we really need to learn in all these areas, and Pune Municipal Corporation is certainly doing a lot. Thanks for sharing all those interesting experiences. And I would like to basically now take up some of the few questions before we really move forward. One of the questions which I like to pose to Madam Sunita Sanghi, she has been with the, Ministry of Skill Development also and entrepreneurship. What are the possibilities for green jobs in the country, particularly in all these areas that we have really talked about? There are policies which are in place. There are Swachh Bharat Mission, for example. Is it creating, or will it be creating some green jobs which are also, sustainable? Our unemployment is a very major issue in the Indian economy, particularly. And the sectors that we are really talking about, how do we really create green jobs in some of these areas which attract some of the, I would say, young educated people in some of these jobs?
Thank you, Dr. Pandey. I think the creation of a job lot depends upon how the sector is going and what is the kind of a demand that is coming for that particular aspect of the green sector. Let me just give you an example. As a Ministry of Skill Development, we have a green job sector skill council, which is actually mapping the market and then mapping the demand for the kind of skills that we require in the economy for those sectors, whether it is a renewable energy sector, whether it is a green building sector, whether it is using the construction waste, and then developing the, skilling and training the masons accordingly, plumbers accordingly. So I think there's a huge scope, but then it depends upon the kind of demand that may be generated in the economy for those kind of job roles. And necessarily, as far as Ministry of Skill Development is concerned, we have put in place the mechanism to ensure that we are able to skill the people as per the national standards. Because we have a regulator in the skill ecosystem which determine, with the help of the Sector Skill Council, the kind of course content curriculum that is required, so that these people are actually able to deliver on ground and they are meeting the requirement of the green job. I mean, that is what. So it not depend upon the demand side, that how the industry, how the users are demanding those kind of job roles. So if there is no demand, even if I'm able to skill the people, I don't think there will be much of a creation of jobs. So what we actually require is a demand, equilibrium between the supply and a demand. So if there is a demand, there's definitely going to be the creation of more jobs as far as the green jobs are concerned.
May I also get back to Rajiv ji? You talked a lot on the resource efficiency part of it. What is your general experience, as a matter of fact, so far as local levels are concerned? How are they trying to address the issue of resource efficiency? Particularly, I would say that whether it is waste management, municipal waste management, or for that matter, other types. Just last week, I heard Honorable Prime Minister saying 70% of India's waste is getting recycled. That was a great statement. So that direction. And how are we going to really address the issue of recycling in a bigger way? Do we have any plans of that kind? Because you also have a lot of experience coming from UNIDO. You are now working with some of these issues as a kind of, I would say that, a great professional.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. I would like to draw on some experiences which we had in UNIDO projects. For example, there was the Kanpur Leather Development Project, where it was also aligning with the Ganga Action Plan. And so along with the industry association in Kanpur, Bantao and Unnao cluster, so there were some initiatives which were taken, and there were introduction of several pilot demonstration units at the industry level, and there were also consortiums which were established, and also there was a clean core group for the clean technologies which was established, and industry really came forward. And after the pilot demonstration units, which there were, I think, about 8, which included this desalting and then water mixing and measurement, also solar drying and solar water heating. And so after seeing the results of those units or the pilot demonstrations, industry came forward, and then they also contributed towards the implementation of the pilot demonstration in their own units. So that was one area which was where industry came forward, and then there was also this measures which were adopted towards cleaner production and resource efficiency. Another example was from the paper sector, where 3 technologies were introduced. One was black liquor heat treatment. Also, there was a membrane separation technology, and then ozone bleaching. So these technologies were also developed along with the institute, the Central Pulp and Paper Research Institute. And these technologies were also than demonstrated at the unit level. So which gave kind of more confidence to the industry and also to the clusters, where these were implemented, to come forward and join hands and take it forward in a public-private partnership modality. So these are the two examples. The other was on the cement industry, where utilization of plastic and municipal waste is there's a lot of potential there. And currently, in the utilization of municipal solid waste and is about, or maybe alternate fuels in the cement industry is about 2% in India. Maybe I think some estimates say that it's 5% now. But in Europe, for example, it is 70%, and in some cement industries, it is 100%. So this also includes a lot of logistics problems, because how to transport the municipal solid waste to the cement industry and things like that, and also the sort of the involvement of the local community also in this endeavor. These are the three examples which I gave you, and apart from that, there are lots of opportunities in the bilateral R&D arena. For example, Government of India has launched several bilateral industrial R&D funding programs. Department of Science and Technology is leading that, and so there is an opportunity to co-develop and co-implement these technologies in several sectors, which basically focus on clean tech, on the waste management, water efficiency, also looking at low-cost health. So there are different possibilities. Also, other area which we were trying to tackle was that this paddy burning in paddy straw burning in Punjab and Haryana and other northern states. So one approach could be utilizing this paddy straw for making packaging grade paper, and also deriving useful products from the waste. So these are some of the possibilities.
But are they yielding results, or there are only indications of possibilities?
See, there are some developments which are taking place, but the issue with this paddy straw is high silica content. So industries and the institutes have to work together to see what kind of technologies could be implemented at the unit level or at the on the field. So one is, of course, the collection and transportation. Other aspect is the processing of these paddy straw to making useful products. So it is, I think, there are lots of developments which are taking place. There are collaborations also happening, but I think it will take some time before we really get these technologies commercialized.
Because paddy straw itself is a major problem for pollution.
Yes, that's right.
Therefore, those solutions become significantly important.
Sure.
I do have one question which is really bothering my own mind, Deborah. Perhaps I think you have shared some good experiences from Dhaka, and very particularly where you are saying that, you mentioned about how you really, in a way, I would say that how should I say, persuaded the local governments for improving the, I would say, pedestrianization or improving the cycle paths, etc., and also rickshaws, etc. Your own experiences, if you're able to, how do we really persuade, let us say, our own local governments, to follow the path? I do know Government of India does have policies to promote and push non-motorized transport, as we call it. But actually on the ground, things are not happening so much. Very little is happening, but very little is happening. Like, for example, Sanskriti mentioned about Pune, only few kilometers, of cycle paths. And I was actually trying to check with my own city where I live, the city of Gurgaon. They have a plan for few hundred kilometers for next 20 years. Do we really wait for that? Deborah, are you still there? Or She probably is there, but she is not seen. Anyway, I think, there are as such by the participants questions per se, but with that, some of this that you have really shared with us with your experiences, different kinds of experiences, different policies, etc. They are very promising in one sense that, we are moving in the right direction. We are trying to achieve the kind of commitments that we have made to the international community in that direction. But there are challenges at different levels that we do realize. And with that note, I would like to say, for example, conclude until, unless there are some questions also by the, I would say, distinguished speakers themselves. If there are any observations or questions, I'll welcome them. Otherwise, we'd like to close the section.
Yeah.
Dr.
I
Kulwant,
have one small.
Go ahead, Professor Pandey. I was just going to respond to Dr. Kulwant's question, which he had put to Deborah. If I may, I just complete it.
Yes, please do that.
No,
yes.
I think now that, cities are showing already some good practices, in the realm of both waste management and transport. I think these case examples become really precious, and we should really take the trouble to learn from them. There may be both, good things which have emerged as well as learnings which have emerged. But these are very precious things which have happened in the recent months or years. And I think learning from those and multiplying the success, I think that's really something that we should do with, again, as I say, with a very engaged ecosystem, including the public and including the decision makers.
But Sanskriti here, I just would like to say that this is possible only if you are able to document these practices. Unless and until we are able to document the practices, nobody will ever get to know, and they start reinventing the wheel. I mean, this is what I started doing in Niti Aayog when I was senior advisor. Organization started compiling the best practices in the urban ecosystem, but then I left it in between when I was transferred. Somebody else may do it, but this is what is required actually. Documentation is very, very important. We don't find that best practices are being documented.
I would like to add what you, Sunita ji said is very right. And I am very happy to note that at a national level, things are now getting into right place. Last year only, Honorable Prime Minister launched a new campaign, what they call Waste to Wealth campaign. And it is being directly, in a way, monitored by the Prime Minister's own office. And they are documenting, interestingly enough, several successful proven technologies which are really available and which are proven technologies. Cities can really easily pick them up and adopt. And similarly, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs on their website have put in several success stories, and probably they are adding on some of them. You are very right. Documenting them is certainly very, very important. But I think the way forward is also that local governments have to work with the community. I am really convinced that what, for example, Sanskriti said or Deborah said, basically how they have really been working closely with the local governments and trying to also, work closely with them. Without them, perhaps I think it will not really be possible to achieve what some of these cities are really doing so good. There are some good examples that came from the city of Bangalore, some good examples coming from the city of Pune. There are some very interesting examples. I am sure, I think Dr. Pandey, who, as a matter of fact, I would say that organizes a lot of programs at a national level or even local level, will be able to highlight more. Pandeyji, last word from you.
Yes, sir. In fact, I want to add what all of our panelists agreed. Wider awareness and involvement of stakeholders. There are multiple stakeholders in any city. Like in Bangalore, it is court which gave very decisive judgments. Like on intervention of the court, ward committees were set up. only city in India where ward committees are there with mandate to prepare a micro plan for solid waste. Community is organized in Bangalore through WhatsApp groups. There are 7 very important WhatsApp groups covering the health officer, community leaders. There are master trainers developed from the community. There are Shuchi Mitras. So community, court, counselors, and awareness. In Bangalore, they have each Sunday they have composting Santhe, that is Mela, in one ward on rotation, where the different vendors come. They show that this is how you can process your kitchen waste. This is how you can, big companies also come, you can treat in your colony the water. So those type of initiatives involving multiple stakeholders, as done in Bangalore, are yielding positive results. 40% of the kitchen waste is processed in Bangalore. So now they are creating SPV, which will further take up these issues in a manner in which all stakeholders put their best.
If I may add, I think what Dr. Pandey and what also you all also added, that there's a lot of potential and case studies and best practices. These indeed need to be documented. But at the same time, we also need to see how the technologies which have been developed, or the best practices which have been developed have been, are being uptaken by the industry. And there are lots of R&D institutions which have developed lots of technologies, but the uptake of those technologies has not been adequate, or and there are no industries, and they don't have sufficient funds. MSME sector, they don't have sufficient funds to, or maybe they don't want to go in for it till the time they see that it is actually happening. So the demonstration of technologies, and also funding for technology commercialization, that in collaboration between industry and academia and universities, that I think will be a very important aspect if we are looking at in the long-term perspective. And also this, I talked about this bilateral collaboration. Also there are funds like technology acquisition and development fund, where cluster level interventions can also be funded. So there is a need to sensitize the industry to uptake these kind of technologies and utilize these incentives or the schemes which are already prevailing. I think there's a lack of awareness amongst the MSMEs. Thank you.
I am running out of time, but I like to say, Deborah, please have your last word. Another, I would say, 30 seconds, and kindly respond to my question, which I really posed, and I was waiting for your reply.
Sorry, I didn't hear your question because I had to actually feed my animals. What was the question?
My question was mainly that you have been really trying to persuade, I would say, local government, so far as rickshaws are concerned, so far as cycle, or perhaps I think pedestrian paths are concerned. What has been the kind of approach that you have really taken, from where we can really learn?
Well, I think obviously from this webinar, we're seeing the importance of government and civil society working together. It needs to be a strong collaboration. Civil society, we need to, we work closely with government, but at times we also do have to stand back and criticize when we don't see things going quite as well as we would like. And for government officials to understand the civil society perspective, here in Bangladesh, we have a very friendly relationship with government, but we do criticize when we need to. That's super important. But I also want to add just one point. I work a lot with university students, and I see their concern about the future. They are creative, they are smart, they are worried. And often they have a vision for the future that is much more beautiful than what some of us are putting out there. I would say, as we dream, so shall we reap. If we dream of tiny, tiny changes, slightly reduce these horrible problems that are, they're killing us now, they're going to kill us in the future, that's what we're going to get. But if we dream much bigger, and you understand me, Dr. Singh, and Sanskriti being in the Car-Free Cities Alliance with me, our dream is huge, but it's beautiful, and we could solve so many problems simultaneously. And I think we need to encourage people to have bigger dreams. We need to give more power to younger people who are going to be stuck with the results of what we're doing now. They're the ones who are going to be around the longest to suffer from the climate crisis and all of these other problems. Enable them to become stronger activists, or if they're going to work for government, to institute these bigger dreams, and that we not be content with very, very minor changes that are not going to solve these problems. We can do much better. We need to believe we can do much better. And as we work together, government and civil society together, we can create much, much better cities than we have to date. So I hope we'll find some inspiration from this seminar as well as other activities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And I would like to thank all my colleagues who joined us as very distinguished speakers. I would like to say that even at an international level, there are a lot of knowledge sharing practices which are happening. UN Habitat 3 years ago started a program what was called Waste-Wise Cities program, in which I would say that there are almost like dozen Indian cities are also which are part of that. They are trying to have city-to-city cooperation. They are trying to have, I would say, some kind of webinars and knowledge sharing from different parts of the world of how do we really manage our cities in terms of waste management, etc., etc. So there are, I would say a lot of things that are really happening. I would like to say that there has been a lot of lesson learning for me from this webinar. A lot of things that you have really shared will certainly go a long way. This webinar will be available on the Facebook. This will be also available, on the YouTube. Basically, the proceedings will be available on the YouTube. It will also be put up on the All India Institute of Local Self-Government's website. And, with your permission, we will be also putting these presentations also for the benefit of, I would say that all of this website. And with these words, thank you so much. Have a good World Habitat Day and enjoy yourself. It's a urban October. We really need to address all these urban challenges that we have in the cities where we really live. Thank you. And so grateful to. I would equally like to thank my own team from All India Institute of Local Self-Government, Mr. Pandey, Mr. Ashley, Mr. Arjun, and all others, those who have really been lending the total support at the back of all these webinars in organization and circulation. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.